at a garage sale, and we are going to use the Metal Illusions and epoxy techniques to put a new finish over the top that will greatly improve the look. When I bought it, it's wood, and we've done some prep work to it. When you first have something you want to cover, if it's wood, you would want to make sure it's a smooth surface, and we've glued a few things back together and sanded it down. And the blue is a moisture barrier that we've already put on. Cover it with a brush, just make a good a solid coverage all the way around on the sides because it will all run over. And just make sure you cover it, maybe even 2 coats if it's raw wood especially. Next thing we're going to do is put on our primer. This is the Metal Illusions epoxy primer, and it's not complicated. I just pour it on, and I paint it with either a paintbrush, you can use a roller. Just make sure I have a good solid coverage. This is actually probably a little thick. I'll spread everything out really good. You don't need a lot, just cover it. This comes in black and white. I like to use the black a lot because it gives it a nice background color for the finished look. If you want to use white, if you're using a light color, you might want to use white because you could change kind of the hue of the color. You can also tint the white with our colors for a real consistent color all the way through. Make sure you wear clothes that you don't mind getting dirty. Our table's dry now, and the next step is resin, which I've poured out of here into just a little paper cup. And the reason for this is the epoxy with Metal Illusions won't stick to the sides very well, so I'm going to color the resin and put it around the sides. I'll put probably, I'll do it a couple times. I'll let it dry and put maybe 2 or 3 layers just to give it a little color to match the top, and then we'll be ready for the epoxy. So I'm also going to add just a little bit of my metal flake to help it stick. And I'm going to pour in, I've got to decide on my colors, and I'm using Canyon Jumper for my side, I've decided. And stir it up, and it'll be a nice coppery color. And then I'm just going to paint it on the sides of my table. The first coat will soak in, so that's why I do 2 or 3 coats on it. Let it dry a little bit in between. It doesn't take long to dry, just a few minutes. By the time I get around to the end of the table, I'll probably be ready to go over it with another coat. It's okay if it gets on the top part just a little bit. It won't hurt. Some of the epoxy will stick, but most of it will just run off, and this way you will still have a nice color to your sides that will blend in with the top. So while we're letting the resin dry, I'm going to mix up my epoxy. I'm going to need a stirring stick. You might want to use, if you have a larger amount, you might want to use a little hand mixer, drill. But for this, I'm just going to use a stirring stick, but I will make sure I get the bottom, really good. I've got part A and part B, and you don't want to ever get the top mixed up, or you will never get it back off. The B is for black, and A has a white top. I'm going to put in my part B first because it's a little more liquid, and then the part A will sit and sink into that. If you put the part A in first, you just got to scrape the bottom really well. So I like to start with part B. And I'm going to mix it 50-50. I take into consideration how much I think I need for my project. These, the gallon-and-a-half kit that's of epoxy that's in the starter kit will cover 20 to 25 square feet, which this is about 3.5 to 4 square feet. You can cover several things with it. Maybe a vanity top. You can go over cultured marble. You could cover other tables. I'll also show you some artwork I've done because it's just fun, a fun tool to use. You can see this comes out a lot slower. So I want to make sure I'm 50-50 in my mix. I'm going to look at my containers after they settle and see if it looks the same. Now I'm going to stir it good, remembering to scrape the sides. If you don't mix your epoxy well, you probably have a little bit of stickiness to the top that won't go away. And it's fixable. You just have to re-pour epoxy and make sure you mix it good this time. Let's see, I think that looks like about right. Now for this project, there's several different ways I can proceed. I've got metal flake, I've got colors. There are some metal flakes that have color, that's all you need. There's Copper Canyon and gold and silver. This is white, Arctic white flake, and I mix this in the epoxy and put the color in the epoxy. It's kind of to taste, just takes a few drops. These are super stains. I've got super stains and dispersions that work well with the Metal Illusions, and doesn't take much at all, just a couple of drops to color it. For this project, I'm also going to take out some epoxy separately and put the color in the epoxy without metal flake. So before I put in my metal flake, I'm going to use a couple of smaller containers and just divide out the epoxy because I want to use several colors. So I've decided to use 3 colors on this project. The black and the white, I'm just going to put into the epoxy without metal flake. And the canyon jumper, I'm going to add metal flake. You can do 1 color with metal flake. Tim has the owner of the company has a video on YouTube with the Copper Canyon showing 1 color and doing some other different techniques. So I chose to do something different. Okay, so I divided out my epoxy into 3 cups for my 3 colors. We've got white, white in here, just a little bit, probably about a cap full if you wanted to measure it. More or less to taste. Sometimes if I have if I use Blue Hornet, it's a really strong color, I'll only use a drop or 2. Depending on how dark I want my blue. Or white. Next I'm going to put black Mistress Mercy over here. Just maybe half a cup, capful. Okay, now my Arctic White Flake, which I'm going to put in with my Canyon Jumper. And just a little dab here on the end of my stick. Let's see how that does on it. Just a little more, see. Okay, go back and add more if I want more. Jumper. A nice shiny tone to it, coppery. Metal flake gives it that shine. A little more color. Okay, now I'm ready to put it on the table. It's very technical. Main thing I want to make sure I do is cover the entire table. This is just a start. If I had 1 color, I would take the 1 color and put it all over and just paint it all over. But since I'm doing several, I'm going for a different kind of look. I'm going to kind of mix them up. Here. you want to make sure your edges get covered. And I'll wait a little further down the pouch. Don't worry about that too much because it's going to be dripping over. Add a little black. I think I'm going to need a little more epoxy mixed up. Which is why I poured in separate buckets so I go back and use my original bucket. It's still clean. I'll let them run together a little. I'll play with it more once I get the whole table covered. Some blending of colors, that's what you want, or that's what I want. It's really all personal taste. Now let's add a little canyon jumper. Spread that out. Still just trying to cover my table right now mostly. And we'll come back and intermix the colors more once I get that done. And there's no way to mess it up. It always turns out looking cool in the end. And really, if you just hate it, you can come back and pour another layer of epoxy over with different colors. But I never hate it, so. But I would recommend starting with a sample board, just a little piece of wood. Test out what you can do with it. Understand how the material works before you start covering tables. Usually best. I do have enough for the whole table like that. So now I'm thinking about what do I want it to look like when it's finished. And this is just a start. This will stay in a state that I can manipulate it for a good 20-30 minutes, maybe 45, keep pushing it. And what I want to do during that time, and I can start now, but it doesn't really make a lot of difference because it is a self-leveling product. So I want to make sure in 20 minutes or so, 30 minutes, that it's still doing what I want it to, as far as having movement. But right now I'm just kind of getting an idea of the look I want. You can use different things. Still need to make sure the table's totally covered. A little spot right there. And I can take my stick or toothpick or whatever you might have laying around. I like to guide it through, pull one color into the next. You don't overthink it, but definitely want to create some feeling of movement. Especially the Metal Illusions. The epoxy without the metal flake, you can have some movement with. The Metal Illusions will really give you a lot of action. And they interact differently. I like mixing them up. You can just do all Metal Illusions, all epoxy. So I've been playing with this. Just take my brush. I like to make sure there aren't any hard edges, but there's no rules. I like to make them blend well, give it a lot of movement. You can continue to do this 30 to 40 minutes after you pour, and it'll self-level. But if you stop too early, it'll level out too much. You won't have as much movement. So the movement that you put in later will stay more than what you did at the beginning. It doesn't hurt to go ahead and give it some movement in the beginning, but it's not going to end up that way. And then it will still continue to do its own thing after you're done. So the bubbles I created, I'm going to suck them out with a blowtorch, run it lightly over. And that kind of pops the bubbles and puts them in their place, and you can do that multiple times or not at all. I could also at this point put alcohol on it that would give it a depth, denatured alcohol. But it's not really the look I'm quite going for in this one. I could probably continue to work this for another 10 minutes. I think I'm about done now because I'm kind of liking it. Took my glove off for the blowtorch so I didn't get it sticky, but I always wear my gloves using the epoxy just because it's very sticky. So this this is pretty much it. The other thing you can do after the next day, it'll be dry tomorrow, about 10 hours, and you'll have little drips. It'll continue to drip over that period, and I can come in with a blowtorch and scrape those off so it's smooth on the bottom. You just heat them up and then take a little chisel or scraper and knock them off. And your table will be ready for light use, but give it about a week to cure up before you use it a lot. It's got to set in good, so give it about a week to sit lightly used, and then it's ready to go. The epoxy is something that you would want to keep in a covered environment or indoor. I do have a different type of finish for outdoor that is a whole other thing, but you could put it outside, but it would possibly yellow in the sun over time. So I usually do this for indoor products. So we're all done with our project. The things that I used for this, the moisture barrier was first, and then the primer, and then the resin with some color. Next, I mixed the epoxy and I divided it into three, however many colors you want. So I needed some of these plastic tubs, or you can use plastic cups if you're not using a large amount. And then mixed it up with the colors. I added Arctic Flake to one of them, and here's my Arctic Flake. I have some stir sticks, some gloves. I like to use chip brushes. You can use foam brushes, and that's all we needed for that project. This is something else you can do with the epoxy, and I've created some different artwork. This is Crimson Avenger all over in the background, and then orange torch, and pretty much just spread out the epoxy and decided on a plan of what I wanted to make. I started my flower here and just kind of swirled it out. Here's another flower that I actually added more colors to. And another idea. This is kind of an abstract dancer. Just covered the board first and mixed up the colors, and then took a little bit of white on top and drew it out pretty much with a little stick, and I think he had a little paintbrush too. So it's really fun to play with. I had a friend that I think made coasters or something for all her family for Christmas. You know, be creative. You tell me what you come up with. I bet you can think of things that I never have. So. This is our table now that it's done. We took a blowtorch and chisel, knocked off the drips underneath, and then we took honing oil and a palm sander to give it a matte finish on top. But you could leave it shiny also, either way works. This is a list of the products that are included in your starter kit. These are a few more things that you will need to have on hand when you get started.
I'd like to see photos of your projects. And call me with any questions. Thanks for watching.